Recording started. So for those of you watching live, hello and welcome. Nice to see you. For those of you watching on YouTube, thanks for joining us afterwards. I'm just going to put a link in the chat there with our YouTube channel for those of you that haven't seen it. We've been doing these webinars once a month for the past nearly a year or so. And we put the recordings of all of those up on our YouTube channel. So you can go and have a look back at some of the other topics there. So my name's Harry Key. I recognize some of your names and some of your faces, but lots of new people here as well. Today's session, we're looking at burnout and this idea of the great resignation. It might be a phrase that you've heard or you might not have heard it before, but really we're looking at a huge amount of people experiencing burnout in their jobs at the moment and just taking the option to leave. And we'll discuss that as we go through the session. And then we also want to look at what we can do for resilience for the future. We know more difficulty is coming, and it's not just in the workplace, but in our personal lives as well. You know, as Haifa just told us here in the chat, you know, there are people that are not just dealing with their work situation, but the heavy topics and heavy times of what's going on in their personal lives, either where they are or where they come from, with their families being stuck elsewhere and not being able to see them. Got Lindsay in the chat. I'm Lindsay from Turning Lives Around, a service that supports homeless offenders who have complex needs. Here today to try and learn some techniques to avoid burnout from both work and personal life. Brilliant. Thank you for joining us. Patrick from Plan International. I'm here today because someone close to me is going through burnout at the moment, looking for ways to understand how I can be of support to them. So brilliant. Thank you for everyone for joining and for taking part in these sessions. I really enjoy them. I hope you do too. So my name's Harry Key. I'm the head of global specialist services at CiC. It's a fancy job title that means I work on lots of our different projects, mainly working with our international team and working with the kind of group sessions like this that we do across the globe to try and address some of these difficult questions. Someone saying to me here privately, hi, I work in investment research. And Carol saying, hi, I'm Carol, HR at Lighthouse School in Leeds, a school for young autistic students. So thank you all for joining me. As I say, please ask me as many questions as you like. Type them out in the chat. I'll get to as many as I can. If you send me a question privately, remember I'll answer it, but I won't read out your name or anything that would identify you. So what's happening? Why have I brought you here today to talk about this interesting and strange topic? Well, we're working longer hours. And with the stress of changing working practices and this uncertainty that we're dealing with now and for the future, combine that with the general stress and trauma of this period, be it the pandemic or the various conflicts going on across the world, we can get burnout quite easily. And we get this feeling when we're burnt out, this uncertainty that adds to the uncertainty we're feeling at the time, and where we feel like we just can't carry on. So people leave. In July 2021, 4 million Americans quit their job. It's a huge amount. And 94% of occupations in all fields have more vacancies now than they did in August 2019. So not only are people just leaving their role, they're not taking up new ones. We've seen a marked decrease in the number of applicants for each role as well. Stands out in the chat, can the presentation be accessed via that link? We'd love to share with my daughter who's struggling. Yeah, so the link I shared is a link to our YouTube channel. You'll find all the recordings of those sessions out there. So I want to hear from you, and I've put a question here at the bottom of the slide. You'll find most of my slides have a question for you at the bottom. Please do send me your responses in the chat. Have you felt like you can't carry on? What would you do? I think it's really important to understand from a personal perspective, have we felt this ourselves? And I'm going to go into more of the intricacies of burnout and how it feels a little bit later on. Sandra saying, I'm joining from Mott McDonald. I've just come back from being signed off from work due to burnout. I've got people with real lived experience of this in the room. Thank you. It came about due to a combination of health issues, overworking, and not being able to get to see my family in South Africa and other issues. I'm hoping to get some advice on how to balance everything while still being able to keep a stable working life into the future. And this is it. People want to work. People love their jobs in the most case. People feel attached to them. And the very fact that people are leaving at the moment in such high numbers shows us how lots of people have just reached a breaking point. And John's saying in the chat, yes, and I've actually quit my job 2 weeks ago. So there's people who are experiencing this, and the only option that people can see quite often is leaving the job, leaving the organization entirely. Great. So a little bit of a closer look. A surge in working hours and responsibilities are the root of burnout for many. Let me know in the chat if you feel the same, if you're someone that's experienced this. Have your hours of work stretched? Have the responsibilities you're dealing with changed? Found some really interesting data on this in a recent Guardian article. I say recent, it was as recent as about 6 hours ago because it came out this morning, and it made me go back to my slides and add some more things in. 70% of remote workers have been spending some time working on weekends at the moment. Don't know about you, but I'd include myself in that 70%. It's happened to me. It's not something I did a huge amount before. You know, I would pick up severe and serious clinical cases on the weekend as needed. That's part of my role. But I'm now answering emails on the weekend, doing little bits and bobs here and there. Resignations, redundancies, and slower recruitment take up means those of us that remain shoulder more responsibility. And 36% of people who've experienced burnout say it was an increased responsibility that contributed to that. Just feeling more like I've got to do more stuff and I've got more things going on in my life. I have to add at the bottom here, this is harder for some people than it is for others. Working parents have experienced some of the toughest working conditions they've ever seen in their lives. And women, I think it's around about 90% of women might have experienced burnout, around 72% of men. The percentages are very, very high, but they're slightly higher for women. Someone said to me here privately, I don't have a choice. I've struggled, but I live alone and have a mortgage, so I can't just leave. I'm surprised so many people can. Well, I think you're right. I think it is surprising that so many people can and feel they can. I think some people are leaving jobs even though they are in tenuous financial situations and personal situations because there's just no other choice. Sometimes our health and physical and mental well-being has to come before these things. But yeah, it's really tough. Lots of people feeling stuck in their jobs as well. And again, that's only going to lead to more burnout. If I'm feeling burnt out but I can't leave, what else can I do? I'll share some tools and tips a bit later on. Julianne says, I also think the pandemic has made us reassess what's important. Yes, it's a really important part of this, Julianne. Thank you for bringing that in here. Yeah. When I've started to realize that there's death and destruction and randomness out there, sitting at my desk for 9 hours a day answering emails seems a little pointless sometimes. I'll agree with you there, Julianne. Thank you. Anyone else feel the same? Let us know in the chat. Someone says here, privately, hi, I work in investment research in the city. Started my professional career in June 2020, the height of the pandemic. Different to many of my peers, I had the task of looking after my elderly parents. Again, such a common thing that I'm hearing. It's not just the work, it's the things going on at home. Caring responsibilities are rife these days with people who have got a full-time career as well. As a young professional, they go on, working in industry where it's difficult to relate to peers, I feel the constant need to work harder to demonstrate, especially if you're at the early stages of your career. Yeah, I can really feel that. My team value the work I do, but feel that I'm achieving my capabilities, which in turn is leading to me being even more burned out. Yeah, the more we do, the more we get sent. Outside of this, I haven't been able to see my family. They're based in other parts of the world, exam burdens and relationship difficulties. Yes, I'm trying to compare myself to my younger self, and I am, in all honesty, now exhausted. Well, first of all, I'm going to pick something out of what you said there, that comparison. If any of you have been to my previous sessions, I've talked about this a lot recently. We're getting stuck quite often in our mind in these unhelpful, unhealthy comparisons. So think about this. Whenever I notice myself comparing myself to someone else or a previous or future version of myself, think, is this comparison helping me or hurting me? I can take a hurtful comparison and I can find some useful things in there that I can learn from. But what is the sense, particularly when I'm comparing myself to myself? What is the sense in hurting myself over that? I'm still the same person. I'm just in different circumstances. So think about that previous version of yourself and what seemed so good, what they were doing. What were the things that you did to look after yourself that don't feel possible now? Things like that. And you can try and find some positivity in that negative comparison, hopefully. Liz has said, seems like lots of people are struggling with burnout. Is it all stemming from the pandemic or is there something else behind this? That's a really good question. I think, you know, over the past decade, our careers have changed. Careers has become much more specialized. I think there's been a long period of real competitiveness over roles. Anyone here that deals with any recruitment in their organization will know the number of people applying for each role has absolutely skyrocketed. There's a lot of unemployment around and a lot of skills going wasted really and unused. But now that we're seeing this drop in recruitment and an increase in people resigning, I think it's just a kind of straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of people, the pandemic. But it's not just the working issues. I want to be really clear here, as so many of you have said in your comments, both publicly and privately to me here. It's about what's going on at work combined with what's going on in my home life. So of course, yes, the pandemic is affecting both. It's a real pervasive effect the pandemic has had on changing our lives and the way that we live them. Someone's responded to Liz there. For me, Liz, the pandemic added an extra layer. Previously, I'd work hard, yes, but I felt safe, for example. Suddenly, I was clinically extremely vulnerable, feeling exhausted and trying to stay safe and working and having a family in a country and going through turmoil once again. It's just becoming too much, basically. Yeah, really important. So this working hours stretching, it might be some of us just pushing ourselves and working hard because we enjoy it, but then we forget that if we're pushing ourselves and working extra hours at the moment, we might not be getting so much out of our personal lives. And if that starts to drag on and pull at us, especially if it starts to pull at us emotionally, again, all of this seems kind of a little less valuable and a little less full of points. Yeah, full of points, pointful. I was trying to find the opposite of pointless. Pointful. We'll go with that. So what does it look and feel like? What does burnout look and feel like? I've shared this in some of my other presentations, so I thought I'd give a slightly different point of view, maybe more of the kind of the way that it changes the way we feel, our mood. So are you having trouble concentrated or being and staying productive? This struggling to get started? Having difficulty maintaining consistency, having real ups and downs of your energy levels is quite a sign that burnout's something that might be going on. If you feel irritable, cynical, or critical of yourself and others, obviously, if you've always been like that, then there's no change. It might just be something to do with your personality and how you see the world, and that's absolutely fine. But if you suddenly become more irritable, more cynical, more critical of yourself and others, I'm thinking back to when you that person who made that comment comparing themselves to an earlier version of yourself. That's quite self-critical and perhaps a little cynical to think that 2019 Harry has anything to do with 2021 Harry. We are dealing with a completely changed and different world now. But how about your physical health suffering? It is so easy to ignore the signs of burnout in our physical body, to link the emotional state and the psychological state that we're in with our work with our physical state. But maybe you're having sleep problems or a sudden increase in digestive issues, headaches, or chronic fatigue. These could all be related to burnout at work and in our personal lives. Let me know in the chat, how else do you feel burnout? I think we've got so many people here that are either going through it right now or have done in the past. I'd love to hear how it felt to you, because the more signs and symptoms that we can share with each other, the more awareness around this we can spread. I'm only one person with my experience, and yes, the experience of lots of people that have come to me as a therapist, but also I'm limited in my cultural knowledge and cultural understanding. And I know we've got people from all over the world here, so I'd love to hear your points of view on how you felt burnout, what it's looked like and seemed like to you. John's added a really important comment here to say, for me, the signs are around self-worth and confidence, which lead to comparing yourself to previous versions and future versions. Yes, self-worth, self-understanding and self-confidence are really linked into burnout and how we experience it. So one of the big things that human beings do that, well, I hate, it's on my hit list of, things to remove if we get a chance to evolve a bit more, is this idea of turning everything inwards on ourselves. When a human being experiences a difficult emotion, maybe sadness, maybe negativity, what we always do, as well as experiencing it out in the world, we turn some of that in on ourselves. You think of the person who's stressed and running late for work. What do? Maybe they shout at the bus driver or something like that, or shout at their kids in the morning or their partner before they go off to work. But they're also shouting at themselves. There's also some of that negativity and that difficult energy turned inwards. And that's what leads to a chipping away of our self-esteem and our self-worth. It's one of the things I talk to people a lot about who are dealing with chronic stress and burnout and things like that. How are you seeing yourself? Because we know we're not doing as well as we'd like to. We know we're not enjoying things. And we start to turn that negative lens on ourselves. And that can bring on the real difficult side of burnout, which is severe depression. Burnout often comes with a change in our depressive mood state as well. Thanks for sharing that, John. Remember, if you don't feel like sharing these things publicly, you can always send me these questions or comments as a private message. Just select my name from the drop-down list in the chat box. Charlotte says, exhausted, snappy, and emotional. Yes. And John agrees it's a catch-22 unless you break the loop. Yeah. Lazan saying feeling flat and a lack of joy. Yeah, so great, you're noticing these symptoms. We need to do something about it, right? If I'm living a life that's lacking joy, I need to try and find some joy. I need to be proactive about that. But all the negative points of burnout tell me it's my fault, or the world's never going to change and I'm never going to change, so I'm stuck in this. Someone saying to me here privately, feeling irritable and self-critical as well. Someone else saying exhaustion and lack of motivation, a shorter fuse, headaches. So all of these are real common signs and symptoms of stress as well. Yeah, burnout is just stress on a massive scale. I say just, it's stress on a massive scale and it's horrible. But, you know, can we notice these physical symptoms in ourselves at the earliest stage possible? For instance, let's say I wake up this morning and I know I have to start work at some point, but I've got a headache. What do I do? Do I just forget that I have a physical body? Do I just forget that I'm suffering and my brain and my mind is telling me, hey, Harry, something's up, do something about it? Do I just force myself into work? Or can I do something to care for myself first? Can I do something to treat myself with kindness? Nicholas says everything you said, but my severe digestive issues were extreme. I ended up being taken to A&E by ambulance, vomiting blood. Yeah, really common thing, unfortunately, around burnout. Because we're experiencing stress with burnout on such a high level, we experience adrenaline and cortisol on massive scale, and that really affects us physically. It brings on headaches because we're clenching our jaw because we're in this fight or flight mode. It changes our digestive system. Remember, it's my dumb animal brain thinking I'm in danger. So it messes with my digestive system. Because if I'm in a life or death situation, I don't want to waste energy on digesting food. So yeah, Hannah just says so tired all of the time. Nikki says, for me, it's grinding teeth at night, this clenched jaw again, this adrenaline, headachy, weary, digestive issues. Someone else saying, just feeling like I can't cope with life. So something a bit more existential coming out there. I was teaching and trying to manage my family life. I never had any time to see my children. I was so miserable and tearful all the time. So another thing that adrenaline and cortisol does in our brain is it messes with our prefrontal cortex where we regulate emotions. So we become so unregulated in our emotions. That's why we have more angry and irritable outbursts. That's why we have more sadness and deep depression. That's why sometimes we might get to the point where we're taking those emotions out on other people so much, no one wants to be around us. And we're suffering and we're hurting and we're pushing people away and withdrawing a bit ourselves. Barbara's saying, I noticed that I get a perfectionism. Either it leads to burnout or it may be an effect. Yeah, I think that could be cause and effect in there, Barbara. I think perfectionism can drive us to be more stressed and live off stress a bit more. And it can also be an effect of burnout where it's this kind of risk-taking behavior that comes with burnout. What we're always trying to do is just get back on top. One big win and I'm back on top. I always imagine the person in the movie gambling, right? And they've got one last hand and they take all their rings off and their watch and their car keys and they just go, right, I'm going to get back on top with this one bet. That's how it can feel with the risky nature of burnout. Sometimes the risk we're taking with burnout, by the way, is just continuing to show up for work. If there was any other thing going on in your life that was hurting you as much as your work does sometimes, and you kept going back to it, you'd think yourself foolish, or at least trapped in an abusive relationship, right? And it can be the same with our work. The thing that we need most is to take a break from it, but we're not. Someone else saying irritable, feeling like I'm missing out on myself. Yeah, nearly all of the above. Someone's saying, Sandra there. Chronic autoimmune disease thrown in there as well. It has a lot of these symptoms anyway. It's so hard to spot where it's coming from. Yeah. Health problems, heartburn, mouth ulcers, headaches. I'm so pleased. I'm sorry to say this about your horrible physical symptoms you're feeling, but I'm so pleased that so many of you are linking these physical symptoms to your emotional and psychological well-being, because it's a really good start. Someone else saying here, lack of drive. You're just giving up on ourselves is such a key symptom of acute stress and burnout. A lack of focus, easily distracted. Yeah, this trouble concentrating and being productive. So the other thing in our brain, the other area of our brain affected by the adrenaline and cortisol we're experiencing is our hippocampus. And that's the area of the brain where we have short-term memory. So we can feel quite at loss. We don't know where we are time-wise. By the way, that brings me to a reminder that I cannot believe it's the 30th of September 2021. I don't know about anyone else, but that freaks me out every time I look at the date at the moment. Someone asked me for a meeting. Can we meet sometime in October? And I was like, oh yeah, it's miles away. And I looked at my diary and realized it was next week. Heavily sleep deprived, panic attacks, bursting into tears for no reason. I want to change that a little bit. You're bursting into tears for a very good reason. Everything is too much. That is a very good reason to burst into tears. Being sleep deprived and having panic attacks is another good reason of bursting into tears. So I get that sometimes it might feel like because there's nothing directly in front of us hurting us, we shouldn't be crying, but it is absolutely fine to burst into tears in general and weep for our general situation. They go on to say fatigue, sweat, loss of interest in my job, hard to concentrate, feeling like I'm not good at my job anymore. Yeah, really good one. Someone else saying privately, I've noticed lately that burnout for me also reflects in thinking others are managing work levels, stress, and productivity better than I do. Hence, I need to push myself harder to overcome those feelings, and it adds into a vicious cycle. I'm really pleased you shared that with me. Yeah, that's a really common one. Um, I got an email from someone I work with quite a lot the other day, and they said to me, I'm so sorry for taking so long to respond. I'm about 3 days behind with my emails at the moment. And I simply responded saying, 3 days? I take that as a win. If you're only 3 days behind on your email, well done. They're emails, they're not urgent. And they replied saying, well, thank you so much. That really helped me to reformat and reshape what I was doing to myself, because we look at ourselves so negatively when we're acutely stressed. By the way, there's an extra secret in there. By saying that to that person, I also helped myself a little bit because I needed to remind myself I'm 4 days behind on emails now. Okay, it's not the worst thing in the world. I'm doing all right. And we'll get onto that a little bit later, that perspective and looking at both sides of the coin. Thanks for sharing that. T saying, when I experience burnout, I find myself losing interest in most things. Yeah, that's the kind of depressive nature of burnout. It makes us focus negatively on ourselves. And so we lose interest in things because we don't feel like anything will work. Liz says, so glad you mentioned memory. My memory is horrendous. If it's not written on a list, it's totally forgotten. I'll show you today's list. They keep on coming. We can't stop. I've actually started running out of notebooks, which is rare because I collect them usually. Wanted to add that because a lot of people are still working from home, they're suffering all day without speaking to someone. Thank you, Kimberly. Really important point. And we'll get onto that a little bit later. If I were in the office and I burst into tears, someone would come and speak to me. Someone would tell me to take some time off, but it goes unnoticed. Such a key point, Kimberly. Absolutely. I think so many of us are dealing with this idea that we have to make some sort of collective decision about whether being in the office or being at home is better, when it's such an individual thing. Today, I'd really love to be in the office. Tomorrow, couldn't think of anything worse. Next Friday, maybe I really want to be in the office. I can't reduce myself to this schedule, this idea that Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays I'm in the office and that's great. The other days I'm at home and that's great too. We are inconsistent human beings. We have moods. The world changes around us, so we need to be flexible as well. We'll talk about this as we go on. Anna agreeing with Julianne, it's reassuring knowing that it's not just me. It removes some of the self-blame, but it makes me sad that so many people are struggling so much. Yeah. Someone said to me here privately, feeling quite emotional at hearing all these symptoms and recognizing them. Feels a bit of a relief to have the realization of where I am emotionally. Absolutely. And sometimes even just giving ourselves an hour for something like this to sit and recognize what's going on is enough. We've got enough on our plates already without thinking that we have to do some big grand gesture to save our lives or to prevent burnout. It can start with something as small as 10 minutes a day, and we'll move on to some practical tools for doing that. Someone else said privately, I think that the lack of going into offices and being face to face with colleagues is having a massive impact. My role deals with challenging situations and is emotional, and some days I just want to talk it through with someone else. Here, Charlotte, absolutely. Oh, sorry, it wasn't Charlotte, it was someone else saying something to me privately. Charlotte said, working at home is flexible, has its benefits, but it's lonely and isolating. Yes, so the person who said it to me privately, my team is a clinical team who deal with difficult cases from all across the world. I would like nothing more than to be back in a room with them so that we can discuss those cases and hold the emotional impact of them together. Absolutely. there are some real key reasons why being in the office is more positive for some of our roles. And it's hard to think of a time when we're going to go back to how it was. So we have to come up with a new method of doing things. I'm going to move on. These discussions are great. Keep your questions and keep your comments coming. I'm sorry I won't be able to get to all of them, but yeah, I really enjoy them. So where do we start? First of all, the thing that so many of you are doing in this session here now, recognizing this in ourselves, is the difficult but important first steps. It's so easy to avoid recognizing this and just think, oh, I'll deal with it tomorrow. I'm looking at a room that signifies I'll deal with it tomorrow. I don't know how many of you else are doing this same kind of thing. My desk is clear and nice and I can work, and if I'm facing this way, I'm okay. If I turn around over here, oh crikey, I've got a lot to deal. I've got a lot of things that I've said I was going to deal with tomorrow. I think there's a couple of bills sitting over here. There's a mobile phone that I forgot to charge. There's, all sorts of stuff over there. It's so easy to avoid dealing with this because it chips away at us as well. And it's never screaming loud enough to be a big crisis until it gets to the point where it screams loud enough to be a big crisis. And those headaches become migraines. That lack of sleep becomes an inability to get out of bed. Those digestive issues become vomiting up blood, like someone said earlier. Horrible stuff. Sometimes as human beings, we wait until something is a crisis till we deal with it. It's how we're built. We're animals. We don't need to deal with bills and stuff. They're just made up. They're just something that the human world has created. But if I'm dying, heck, I've got to do something about it. Someone else saying here privately, I'm not sure if this is a symptom, but I don't want to work for my organization anymore for what they put me through and that they blame me for being emotional after I burned out. Feels like my manager hid themselves behind me. I feel exploited. It's a really, really key phrase that you've used there, exploited. Socialists among you would say that all work is exploitative. There's no way of having, there's no way of having a capitalist culture that isn't exploitative of its workers. But if you've been specifically mistreated around your emotional and mental health, depends what country you're in, but have a look at the legislature, have a look at the rules around these kind of things. I'm not talking about this in a kind of revenge way, but in a justice kind of way. I'll put this in the chat so that everyone can see it. Here in the UK, we have something called ACAS, which is a really great service that can support people with employment law and things like that. If you're an EAP customer of CiC, come and speak to us about it. One of the things that most EAPs give you is legal advice and legal support. It's just a couple of hours on the phone with a legal expert, but it's pretty good. Most contracts will cover employment law, some won't because it's a bit of a conflict of interest. But either way, come and speak to us about it and we can talk you through what your options are. Never feel like you should be in one of those situations alone. Try and find a trusted colleague as well that you can discuss that with. All the more helpful. Sometimes I can speak to a colleague and they can go to HR on my behalf. They don't say my name, they don't say anything that identifies me, but they say, this is going on, what do you recommend? And then you can find out from the HR department in confidence what your options are, because exploitative relationships can make us feel really stuck and powerless. Hopefully that helps. So if you are often feeling this, consider these questions, because it's really important. If you're thinking about leaving your job, it's important first or during that process to recognize what the issues are with that job, because some of them will be with the role, some of them might be with the organization entirely, some of them might be within ourselves and our fit for the place. And the more we can identify that, the more we can decide what's best for us next as well. So are the issues with your role circumstantial, i.e. suddenly working from home because of the pandemic, or suddenly dealing with more responsibility because of a lack of staff? Are they structural, i.e. the culture of the organization doesn't fit with you? To this person who just said that to me privately about feeling exploited, that would be a structural issue of the organization. Your boss is unsupportive, they don't work well with you, you don't fit and they don't fit for you. Or is it skills related? And this has happened so much recently, people taking on all these extra responsibilities that they don't have the skills and or the training for, just because there's a lack of staff. Are you forced to do something that you aren't? Because that might mean that finding a new role in another organization, a big point for you is having a really clear job description from the start. I think it's a really vital way for us feeling cared for and understood. James said to the chat here, maybe only relevant to a minority, but neurodivergence has a big light shone on it. Yeah, neurodivergence has. I've been asked to speak a lot more about neurodivergence and neurodiversity in general over the past couple of years. James adding, the sudden big shift to home working, changes to daily routines and practices, conditions that sit badly with ASD or ADHD traits and coping mechanisms built up over years. Yeah, if I'm dealing with any neurodivergent difficulty, or if I'm dealing with a mental health issue that's ongoing, heck, even a physical health issue that's ongoing, the changes that were brought on by the pandemic have forced me to change some of the things that just kept me going. The really specific things due to me as a human being, because I'm individual and there's no other person like me in the world. The things that I'd come up with suddenly don't work. I've lost a lot of the support that I need. Yeah. Someone's asked here privately. I'm just going to take a sip. How do you let your manager know you feel, I don't want to be looked on as a failure, in confidence? Well, first of all, if I want to speak to my manager in confidence, the first thing I do is sort out the boundaries of that confidence. I have to have a conversation with them that says, I'd like to talk to you about a few things. They're quite personal, and I want to check how confidentially we can discuss these things. And then it's their job as the manager, and your job for managers listening here, your job to be able to outline that confidentiality. Usually it'll be something like, you can share absolutely anything with me in confidence, but if you mention this, this, and this, I have to inform HR. Just give them those rules. Don't be scared of the rules. They help both of you. The rules help both of you have a more comfortable conversation. Because if I know, okay, now I can say anything I like to my manager, but if I mention that I'm being sexually harassed or that there's a risk to my health and safety, they have to tell HR. Okay, great. I don't feel any of those things are going on. Let's get involved. I don't want to be looked on as a failure. I don't know that you do look on me as a failure, but sometimes it feels like that. And I just wanted to have an open discussion with you about it. I think it's a really important discussion to be able to have to that person that asked me that question privately. It's a great question as well. I'd love to hear from you in the chat. What problems are you facing in your role? Do you feel it's circumstantial stuff? Do you feel it's structural, or is it skills related? Has so much changed that you're in a role that doesn't suit you at all anymore? I'd love to know what the proportion is amongst the audience here. Even if you just write out, 1, 2, or 3 in the chat for circumstantial, structural, or skills related. I'd love to hear. Maybe it's a combination. Someone said here privately, I'm a boss. It's because I've put a few things in inverted commas. The pressure to solve all the problems is a big stressor. I don't know how to work around all the issues other people experience, structure or otherwise, and not go mad. Absolutely. Middle management is one of the toughest positions to be in at the moment, I think. You're squeezed from all sides. One of the things that I'll remind you of, you do not have to solve these problems. It is not your responsibility as a boss or a manager to solve these problems. It's just your responsibility to engage in supporting the people to solve them themselves. Yeah, that we must take personal responsibility for our well-being, but the organization must support us in taking that personal responsibility, right? If all I need is a week off, I don't need my manager to force me to take a week off. I need them to make the environment suitable for me taking a week off. So try and I find that so many managers are so fearful of getting involved in questions around mental health because they don't think they can solve the issues. You're not there to solve the issues. I use this analogy of a printer with managers, right? If the printer in your department breaks, you're not expected to fix it as a manager. You're expected to know who to call to get it solved. It's the same with mental health and well-being. Just check in with your staff. I love this question for managers. If someone shares something difficult with you, burnout, stress, something going on in their personal life, I just say, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Do you feel you're getting all the support you need for it at the moment? If they say yes, fantastic. Do you mind if I check in with you next month to see if that's still the same? Then we've set up a supporting relationship where I'm going to go to them and check in on them. Beautiful. If they say, no, I'm not getting all the support I need, you say, okay, let's look at the options together. We can speak to HR and get this. We can go to the employee assistance program and they can offer this. Or there's these options, list. And I'll talk to you managers about having a cheat sheet a bit later on, because remembering all of that stuff is half of the problem, I think. Remembering all the great stuff that your organization does to support your staff. Hopefully that helps. So 2, couple of people saying circumstantial, structural, circumstantial, huge reduction in capacity, circumstantial, all of the above, unfortunately for Simon. Someone saying privately structural, unsupportive boss who doesn't listen well. I've just changed jobs, Julianne says, but in my previous place, I was leaned on so heavily by my own boss for her emotional and personal support, and it was such a drain. I wanted to offer support, but in doing that, my own team also felt sandwiched. Yeah. Someone saying privately, my issues have been culture fit for me, others not supporting or performing, and I've been expected to make up the shortfall in skills. Yes, that increase in responsibility. I recently witnessed a senior leader which acted in an unprofessional manner, even away from the office, which impacted other people from the office. Yeah. And ironically, Julianne adds, that was in a mental health charity. Stan says, I really like these comments about personal versus managerial responsibilities. Yeah, it's tough. And I think we should be more explicit about it. I think managers, if you can be explicit about saying, look, the world of support and mental health and well-being is really important to me, but it's a very complex and complicated world. And I know that the best way to deal with it is to have an individual relationship with each of my members of staff that works best for them. But I need your help with that. I need you to come and tell me what you need. And if you don't feel comfortable telling me what you need, here's another manager you can go and speak to. Here's HR that you can go and speak to in confidence, and they'll feed it back to me. It's just about being open to having the difficult conversations. Human beings, we get ourselves into the biggest fixes in the world by just refusing to have difficult conversations. There's a reason for that. They're horrible. Difficult conversations are not nice, but the earlier we have them, the better. Hopefully that helps. Someone says here, there's a wider issue with managers not really understanding what we do, and that we have to work twice as hard to have a couple of days off, and then twice as hard when we get back. I think managers probably should understand what you do. I think that's a big part of a managerial responsibility. But if we don't feel they get it, it's kind of up to us to tell them. And that's really tough, but they're not going to work it out on their own. They're not going to magically go, oh, do you know what? I'm going to keep an eye on Harry for a week and see actually what it is he does. I've got to go to my boss and say, look, I don't know if you fully understand what my role entails, but this is what happens. And this is why specifically it's hard for me to take a couple of days off. Tell them about that. Talk to them about your workflow and why coming back from holiday is more stressful than going in the first place sometimes. Someone else saying structural, there's a misunderstanding in the management of the term emotional resilience. They understand it as stiff upper lip. Yeah, I come across that quite a lot. So that you don't have to share your emotions with them. Now, emotional resilience involves absolutely talking about your emotions rather than ignoring them. There is no way of being resilient to something by ignoring it. You know, you tell people that live in places where there's natural disasters happening all the time. Well, you know, to be more resilient, just pretend it doesn't exist and carry on. Yeah, that's not going to get you very far. How about people that come from areas of conflict and conflict zones? Absolutely not. It's exactly the same for us in the workplace. We cannot solve the emotional issues and the emotional fallout that we have by ignoring the fact that we have emotions, because all it does is it just gives us 8 hours of the day, 12 hours of the day for some people, where we can't do anything about it, so we're stuck. So that problem is just building up and building up. Imagine you had a leak in your apartment. Just like, well, I've only got 6 hours a day where I'm allowed to deal with that. The rest of the time I've got to do other things. Absolutely not. You need to drop things and deal with the emotional issues. Yeah, lots of people agreeing with that. Okay, good. Hyper saying, I come from a much more direct culture and it's hard for me to deal with aversion to conflict. It leads to me burning out in the end. Yeah, so we have to address these cultural differences as well, Hyper. I think, you know, if we feel comfortable enough being explicit about them is really useful. Or even just finding people that you feel are similar to you, people that do share either the same culture or a similar culture within the organization, and getting some peer support for that, because it can be so powerful. Right, we've got to move on. I always get stuck on my interesting slides and I forget about other things. So what can we do about it? Well, take some time off. Done. Easy, simple. No, of course it's not. It's really hard to do. So many of us are in desperate need of a break, but not taking one because we're human. We have to rest to take care of ourselves and other people, but we don't do that because we're so pressured and so stressed. I'd love to hear in the chat any other tools and tips that you've come across for coping with burnout. Like I say, we've got so many experienced people in this room, people more experienced than me. I'm lucky enough not to have suffered burnout in my life. There's people in here that have. I'd love to hear what helped you get through it. Share that with the other people listening who might be feeling this for the first time, or might hopefully and this is my main hope for this session, be catching people early on in this who are just feeling a bit of this stuff. Because if I'm feeling a bit of this stuff, it's much easier to deal with. Again, think of it like a leak. If I've got a bit of a dripping tap under my sink, that's much easier to deal with than when there's 2 inches of water in my bathroom and the flat downstairs started to complain and it's costing me a load of money and my time and my energy. That's what burnout is. Look for support. 32% of employers have increased their mental health support for staff during the pandemic. We're not all always aware of what those things are. Speak to HR and see what's available. Just say, hey, I'm just wondering, what are the new well-being stuff going on that I might not have heard of? And managers, get a cheat sheet. Go and speak to HR, look on your intranet, speak to other managers, whatever it takes. I will share with you mine. It's a scribbled page in the back of one of my notebooks, but it's just a list. Here's HR, here's their contact details, here's the things they can do for people at the moment. Here's the EAP, here are their contact details, here's all the things on offer. Ring us. If you're an EAP client of CiC or of anyone else, ring your employee assistance program as a manager and say, hey, I'm a manager. On behalf of my staff, I'm ringing up to find out what services are on offer to us so that I can tell them about it. The EAP will love you. Your staff will like you even more, and you'll feel more confident in dealing with those issues because you know where to signpost them to. Remember, hearing someone's problem and then being able to signpost them to the next useful resource is an incredibly powerful thing that you're doing for someone. It so often gets minimized because a lot of us come from cultures where it's like, someone's brought you a problem, it's your responsibility to deal with it. No, it's not. If someone comes to me as a psychotherapist with a real psychiatric issue, it's not my responsibility to deal with it. I'd be doing them harm if I tried. It's my responsibility to refer them on to the right place for them to get that support. I can see lots of people putting great stuff in the chat. So let's see. Anna says, changed my hours so they were compressed into 4 days a week, gave me a day to myself each week. Lovely. Someone says, what helped me earlier this year was having a wonderfully supportive manager and team who let me take a long break and restarting psychotherapy and psychiatric therapy to deal with my sleep deprivation and mood things. Great. Julianne says, small, simple, micro changes build up to bigger results. That is beautiful, Julie. I couldn't agree more. We don't have to do these big grand gestures. In fact, often burnout and the stress that we're feeling from it makes us think that we need this big gesture. Remember the person gambling and chucking everything in on one last hand? It's the small little things. It's 5 minutes a day to rest, starting with something like that. And I'll share some tools for that in a little bit. Julie goes on to say quick walks outside, healthier food choices, green tea instead of coffee. She says, still drinking her daily Starbucks. Well, here's my Diet Coke. Use the Calm app for 10 minutes of meditation. Yeah, tiny little things like that. Having a virtual background with nature on it, that's a good idea. I would hide my messy room behind it as well. John says, I found support in self-help from Paul McKenna in self-confidence and linked to an Audible book. Thank you for that. Charlotte says, signed up for well-being stuff on Facebook, email, positive blogs. Yeah, I signed up to the Guardian newspaper has this thing called The Upside, where once a week it shares positive news that they've found. I find that really useful. You know, the big money in news is reporting the negative stuff, but there is still positive stuff that goes on there in the world. I often think back to the start of the pandemic and reminding people there's a lot of people doing nice stuff during the pandemic, helping each other out, opening up food banks and things like that. Nikki says, to help me with burnout, I had to learn to say no and also be selfish. By the way, self-care is not selfish. It doesn't count as a selfish thing. So if you're saying no, that's self-care sometimes, and that is not selfish. It's self-preservation. It's vital. If I wasn't comfortable with certain situations, I backed out without explanation. Good. Julianne says, highly recommend the book Burnout by Selena Barker. I love that book. Yeah, it's a good one. Ivor says, I love your post, Julianne, especially the coffee bits. I'm guilty of it. I use Headspace to sleep. Someone says, privately standing up for yourself. Yeah, saying no. I've done this twice now. The first time I had to quit in order to safeguard my health. This time I'm able to speak despite and get my point across despite the sometimes not very nice things I hear back from managers. So growing in strength. That's resilience. Exactly what you've said there is resilience. You've built it over time. And don't forget to speak to your peers. You know, I mentioned this to Haifa when we're talking about different cultures and things like that. Peer support from a trusted colleagues can be incredibly powerful in preventing and understanding burnout. If we get that kind of support, it actually affects the prefrontal cortex. It's been shown. So peer-to-peer support is really powerful. Sitting with someone else who understands the organization can help us find options. Speak to as many people as possible. Guys, so many great tips being shared. I haven't got time to go through them all, but I'd suggest anyone who's here read into the chat and have a little look. Because responding in resilience means we need to stop, by the way. There's no way of being resilient without stopping. Otherwise, we're just stuck in our animal instincts, right? We're just doing stuff on reflex. Breathe, because anxious future-based responses put us into a further panic and make situations worse. Breathing and counting our breathing keeps us calm but present. If you've been to my other presentations, you know the breathing exercise I use is square breathing. It's been around for a long time. Headspace uses it a lot for those people that are talking about it in there. I just breathe in through my nose, counting to 4, hold my breath, and then out through my mouth, counting to 4. Then back in again, back out again. It just slows things down a little bit. It stops me from being in this regressed response of fight or flight. And then I can reflect. Then I can accept the situation. Okay, I've got a flood going on in my bathroom. Realistically, what does that mean for me? What do I need to do? Instead of trying to fight it off or ignore it, I'm there looking at the choices calmly. This doesn't take long, by the way. And if you can be the person to suggest this response in groups, you are the person in the group that everyone loves and can really understand the resilience of. What's that old phrase? When all about you are losing their heads, keep yours. If you can be the one in a group that seems like it's panicking, say, can we just pause for a minute? Maybe take a 5-minute break, go for a walk, get a cup of tea, and we'll come back and chat about it. Because constantly talking about the next step, the next step, the next step makes us forget where we are presently. Hopefully that helps. My favorite resilience tool at the moment is this one. I've shared it with a few people already. We came up with this at CiC. We call it the Crowbar Method. Basically, we are not going to convince people to put an hour in their day every day like this. Hopefully you've enjoyed and found this 50 minutes out listening and thinking about your own well-being useful, but you're not going to be able to do that every day, and I appreciate that. But have you switched off caring for your own wants and needs? Do you simply just work as long as needed at the moment? Are you just surviving? You need boundaries. There is no way of existing without boundaries in this world. Look, I get to show off all my fancy mobile devices that work gives me and that I create myself. I've got a huge collection of these things where people can tell me what they need. I need to know what I need first, right? It protects my time and gives me space to think. So start by this. Look at your diary for after this session, for tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday, right? Cool. Find a time tomorrow, put 5 or 10 minutes in your diary and start with that. I use this method as often as I possibly can. I used to be able to say daily. I don't at the moment, but I'll get there. No judgment. I'll get there. Take your hands, place them on your chest, close your laptop, turn off your phones. Important bit of research that we've done at CiC. If you hold down these buttons on the side of phones, they ask you a question. They say, do you want to turn us off? You say yes. This one asks you 3 times, are you sure? Because it's my work phone, so it has to be like that. And then your phones are off, and they're not going to make any noise, and they're not going to hurt you, and you're in charge of them. Really important messages for our brain to be reminded that they're in charge of these devices. Close your laptop, turn off your other screens. I keep saying this. I don't know why a psychotherapist in 2021 needs 3 screens, but that's that's the way of the world that we're in now, right? We get there. Turn off your other screens and just take a couple of minutes for yourself. I take my hands, I put them on my chest like this, and I close my eyes. And I ask myself a really important question. I say, what do I need today? I say it out loud. My partner in the other room knows when I'm doing this because I say it quite loudly sometimes when I'm having a tough, frustrated day. What do I need today? I need to go outside. Even just doing it in front of people, it still works. I need to go outside today. I haven't been outside. I didn't go outside all of yesterday. I need to go outside today. Know what the weather's like. It's kind of grey. Welcome to London. But I'm going to go outside and see it. Go walk around, get some fresh air. I can do this professionally and personally. This what are my needs? I can do it on the micro scale of what do I need today, the minimal scale of what do I need this week, or I can go really big. What do I want from myself this year? This is starting to train you in switching off. We've become so used to being switched on because we're living in a crisis. Our brain, our amygdala is going, Harry, you could die at any second right now. There's a global pandemic going on. What the heck's going on? My brain's doing all of this and chipping away at my resilience. This is me getting control back. This is me taking charge again, just by closing this dumb laptop, turning these phones off for 5 minutes, caring for myself. Because no one calls me at the end of the day and says, oh, hey, Harry, have you been on your laptop all day? I think it's time to turn it off. No one does that. When I was back in the office, I might get a tap on the shoulder saying, hey, we're going to the pub, or we're walking to the train station. Do you want to come? People used to do this for each other. We just can't when we can't see each other. The person who said earlier, you know, it's so much easier to hide that I'm crying at work when I'm the only one who can see me. Absolutely. Stan saying, I live in a polluted city, but still need to walk daily. I'm going to copy you, Stan. I'm going to go out for a walk after this. John says, mental health is not mental, it's your health. And everybody's really starting to understand this about talking. Yeah, really good. Some great tips in here. I'd love to go through them all with you, but I'll look at them afterwards. Thank you for sharing these. The last thing I want to talk about is perspective, seeing both sides of the coin. Remember I said earlier, human beings, we've got this knack for blaming ourselves, this knack for turning that negative energy that we see in the world on ourselves and thinking, oh, I'm not coping, I'm not doing well. So first of all, think of the incredible resilience you've shown just by getting this far. You've literally survived the biggest health crisis the world has seen in certainly my generation. I don't know about yours. I've never heard of a global pandemic before coronavirus came along. You know, there was SARS and those other ones and things like that, but they seemed quite localized and controlled. This is tough. And you've shown a huge amount of resilience, even without the pandemic, to survive the other things that your life has thrown at you. The day-to-day issues, the big life changes. You are resilient, otherwise you wouldn't be alive. What happens at the end of the day, though, at the moment? Do you see all you have done or all that you didn't manage? I put this one in because I felt this last night. I sat down on the sofa and all my brain could tell me was, oh crap, there's so much stuff I didn't get to today. So much stuff I didn't manage. There's emails piling up, there's bits on my to-do list that I haven't done. And it's something in my brain, I don't know what it was, some magical insight just said, yeah, but what about all the stuff you have done? Why are you so easily forgetting all the stuff you did? Because you sat down at your desk and worked all day. I know I didn't slack off. So I know I sat down at my desk and I start early sometimes. I started at 8 o'clock, 7:30, 7 o'clock sometimes. And I work late because I work with other parts of the world. So I've sat down and worked all this time. Why am I forgetting all the stuff I've done and just focusing on the stuff I wasn't able to do? Talking with others, surprise, surprise, coming from a therapist, can really help us gain perspective. And I noticed that when I emailed that person and they said, oh, I'm 3 days behind on emails. And I said, hey, I take that as a win. I noticed that. I noticed that me sharing it with that person and us talking about it made me feel so much less shame around the fact that I was a few days behind on emails too. Because withdrawing is a very easy automatic response. It's built in, it's part of our lives as animals. Don't punish yourself for this, but treat it as an important sign. If you notice that you're withdrawing and you don't want to be around other people, I see that as a sign, okay? I don't want it at the moment, but I'll need it soon. So I start planning things, maybe for next week, that I'm going to do with other people. Just a brief reminder, for those of you that do get support from CiC, the online EAP services from wellonline.co.uk, probably the best way to find out what's available for you. Or you can always email the team at assist@cicwellbeing.com. It's been a real pleasure to have so many of you here again. I'm just really emboldened by the fact that people keep turning up and listening to these things that we've got to say as CiC. We work really hard as an organization to not just do the in the moment support that we're asked to do for people, but just think wider about the issues we're starting to see and the concerns that we have for the organizations we support, but organizations in general, the world as a whole. So hopefully you found this one as well as the others useful. Just as a brief reminder, go and have a look at the YouTube channel. If you subscribe to that there, you'll be able to see every time that we post one of these. It's usually a couple of days after the presentation. You'll be able to go back and watch it again. And yeah, I'm going to stop the recording now for those of you watching on YouTube. Bye-bye.